Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing? My name is Hitesh, and you're watching Sultan of Soccer. The Premier League kicked off this week. It's that time of the year where 11 men kicking a ball in a field determine my weekend mood. Quickly starting off here with Ipswich Town versus Liverpool. Ipswich Town making their comeback into the Premier League after a long period of time. Fun fact, if you didn't know, but Ipswich Town were part of the first ever Premier League season. Talking about the match itself, Ipswich Town did give a hard time to Liverpool and stopping them from scoring, and in the way also creating a few chances for themselves. But in the second half, we did see that Onslaught tweaked things and had his team play more direct balls. Fun fact again, Liverpool played the most through balls in game week 1 across all the games that happened. We also saw that Alexander-Arnold was deployed out further right, and we could see him playing those balls up top. Eventually, both the goals, the one that Salah scored as well as Jota scored, came through those direct balls. It's going to be interesting to see how Mohamed Salah does this season and whether he can challenge Haaland for the Golden Boot. Quickly talking about the other games, as West Ham versus Aston Villa, Emery for, the 100th time, tweaked his team ever so slightly and making sure that Lopetegui thought that Villa were playing 4-4-1-1 formation. But eventually when the game started, we could see that Villa were more of 3-4-2-1 formation, and we could see McGinn and Rodgers playing in that number 10 role. Also, Onana, great start to his Aston Villa career, scores in the first 5 minutes of his Aston Villa career. We will have to see whether Onana is a good signing for Villa though, because in my opinion, he's one of those players who's sensational 1 week, but then just disappears for like 2 weeks in a row. So it's going to be interesting to track his career at Aston Villa. Talking about the game, Lucas Paqueta did equalize for West Ham, and just when we thought that West Ham were getting a grip of the game, John Duran comes in and scores that winner for Aston Villa and kills the game. John Duran, if you don't know, has the second best goal to minutes ratio just after Erling Haaland. Talking about the next game, which was Manchester United versus Fulham, in no ways it was one of the best performances by Erik ten Hag's Red Devils side, but we could see that shades of Ajax all those years ago that Ten Hag had with that high press. Ten Hag definitely has a bunch of holes to fill in his midfield, but that being said, Casemiro did look sharp. Talking about the match overall, the first half, I would say it was evenly matched. Fulham definitely had some of their chances, but Traore, being the kind of player he is, was very frustrating when it came to the finishing of the goal. Talking about the goal itself, a great start for Xerxes for his Man United life. Another reminds me of another Dutch player who actually had his debut against Fulham, who was sitting on the bench. Everyone's guess is right here. We're talking about Ruud van Nistelrooy. Talking about the next game, which was Arsenal against Wolves, Gunners kicking off their campaign with a win. Kai Havertz scoring in the first half, being assisted by Bukayo Saka, and it was a very solid performance as in the first half. In the second half though, we did see players like Partey, Saliba, even Gabriel at times misplacing the ball and giving the ball away to the Wolves player. And in my mind, we Gunners were very lucky to get away with a win because Matheus Cunha couldn't convert on that one big chance that Saliba gave away. And as we thought that there might be some mismanagement of game, Bukayo Saka, the star boy for Arsenal, steps up and literally hits a tracer bullet into the net and makes sure that Gunners come back with 2 full points. It's going to be a very challenging season for Mikel Arteta's men to go against the juggernaut that is Manchester City, because they have no margin for error, because we know what Manchester City can do when they get on with their run. Talking about the next match, which was Newcastle versus Southampton, Saints coming back into the Premier League after spending 1 season in Championship. I will say that they did look very threatening, especially when Newcastle went down to the red card that Fabian Schär got in the first half. They, I think, had about 19 shots, but just couldn't convert those. Ultimately, Joelinton scoring the goal in the first half, which ultimately led to them winning the match. It's going to be very interesting to see how Eddie Howe's men cope up with this season, especially when they're not in Europe. It's going to be interesting to see if we're going to see the Newcastle that we saw 2 years ago challenging all the top 6 teams to get into the Champions League spots. As far as the Saints goes, Russell Martin's style looks very adept with possession domination, but it's going to be interesting if they can cope up with their defensive fragilities. But I think in my mind, they might be going down again next season. Talking about Everton versus Brighton, Fabian Zoller, his first game clearly proved that he, just like De Zerbi, likes his wingers to attack. We could even see that Everton could just not deal with the energy that the wings had, the attacking players had for Brighton. We could even see how impressive Minte was in the first half, ultimately assisting that goal for Mitoma. Again, we saw the same plan throughout the game from Brighton. They kept pressing, very high energy, very attacking mode. Ultimately, Welbeck and Adingra scoring the rest of the 2 goals. So it's going to be really interesting to see if Everton somehow still manage to again survive another season. But ultimately, I think that this is the season when they go down. Talking about the next game that happened in game week 1 was Nottingham Forest versus Bournemouth. Nottingham Forest, just like every time, they just cannot keep clean sheets. They need to stop leaking of those goals, which we could again see, like Chris Wood giving them the lead, making sure that they have a lead to play with, but ultimately Bournemouth came back and equalized in the second half. Talking about other than the goals itself, Danilo, who got injured, the game was stalled for about 10 minutes. It's always heartbreaking to see these players getting injured, but I hope Danilo recovers well and we see him on the pitch quickly. Moving on to the next games. Next game, Brentford versus Crystal Palace. The Bees kicking off their campaign with 3 points with goals from Bumo and Wissa, and they're also showing that they're not totally dependent upon Ivan Toney. Well, it's also going to be interesting to see where Ivan Toney eventually moves, because no traditional top 6 club has come in for him and he looks like he's out to the Saudi Arabian League. Talking about this match, there was a refereeing controversy where the referee blew a whistle before Eze's free kick could hit the net and it was declared as a foul. Well, it's totally open to interpretation, but in my mind, it was never a foul. Talking about the next game, Chelsea versus Manchester City, Enzo Maresca's campaign as a Chelsea manager starting against none other than Pep Guardiola. Overall, I think both the teams had positives. Even though Chelsea didn't score any goal, I think they can still take positives out of these. But how in the world Chelsea has not signed a number 9? I do not understand, because Nicholas Jackson is just too raw. You can see clearly from his position that he takes, floating into offside positions, which I do not think a top striker would do. But again, I'm not sitting in the board, so probably they know much better than I do. That's all I can say. Talking about Manchester City, Haaland kicked off his campaign with a goal before Kovacic scored a second half winner for Manchester City, making sure that Manchester City sealed the game and took all 3 points. That being said, Manchester City were without their key players like Rodri, Stones and Kyle Walker, and it just looked like City was so comfortable that they didn't have to get out of their second or third gear. That being said, it's going to be interesting to see how Manchester City cope up with this campaign with the 115 charges looming over them. And last but not the least, Spurs went to Leicester City. The Foxes making their comeback from after a 1 year of absence in the Premier League, kicking off their campaign by drawing with Spurs. I think Spurs will be very disappointed by coming back with just a draw, because in most part of the games they kept dominating the ball. They tried to create all the chances they could, but they just couldn't find that winning goal. Talking about Leicester City, it's again Jamie Vardy who equalized for them. I will say that being an Arsenal fan, it was really great to see when Jamie Vardy mocked the Spurs fans by telling them that they have never won a Premier League title at home. Well, that wraps up the game week 1 for Premier League. If you like this content, please consider clicking on the like button and subscribing to my channel, and we'll see you in the next video.